মহারাজা তোমারে সেলাম 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 মোরা বাংলাদেশের থেকে মোরা বাংলাদেশের থেকে
With the legacy of the Bengal Renaissance, the region has for decades been at the front line of outstanding cultural and intellectual activity. Bengal has not only produced a crop of Nobel Prize winners, but also legendary authors, movie makers, actors, musicians, and sportspersons who have been at the top of the league of their respective vocations.
ভাষা ভিন্ন ভাষা জানা নাই মহারাজা রাজা মশাই তবে জানা
In West Bengal, after a short stint at the helm by Dr. Prafulla Ghosh, Bidhan Chandra Roy took over as Chief Minister on January 23, 1948. He remained in office till his death on July 1, 1962. These were the golden years of institution building, and his visionary leadership witnessed the fruition of a large number of initiatives in the areas of infrastructure, education, capacity building, and skills development. The following 15 years or so was a phase of intense political unrest, with a number of coalition governments with left support coming and going, while the influence of the communist parties grew steadily in the state. Thousands of immigrants streaming into the state from East Pakistan provided a new social base to the ongoing communist movement. The breakaway Communist Party of India Marxist launched a succession of aggressive civil disobedience movements on issues ranging from distribution of food grains to general price rise, leading to frequent pitched battles on the streets of Calcutta.
The period was around 1969-70. The Left Front government had been in power since 1967. This section, led by Charu Majumdar, Saroj Datta and Kanu Sanyal, felt that the Left Front government had deviated from its original objectives of helping the poorest of the people. At that time, particularly the farm laborers were at the total mercy of landowners and kulaks, the rich farmers. They felt that the government was siding instead of with the farm laborers and sharecroppers, with the landowners and the rich farmers. They asked the government and the party several times to correct their ways, but the latter refused, and instead ultimately rusticated these people from the party. That's how the Communist Party of India Liberation was born.
The Naxalbari movement, which began as a peasants' uprising in the Shiliguri district in 1967, transformed as a violent students' movement in the city of Calcutta in the late 60s, with frequent murders, ransom killing, bombing, tear gas shelling and firing by the police, which crippled normal life in the city for quite a few years. It was around noon on a summer day in the early 70s when veteran journalist Apratim Mukherjee was travelling in a tram to his newspaper office in Bagh Bazar from Esplanade when the tram entered Chitpur Road.
Suddenly, the vehicle came to a halt. Right in front, on the left side, there was the office of Nepal Roy, who was a very popular Congress leader and who even at that time, which was the heyday of the Naxalite movement, where by noon almost the entire city of Calcutta used to close down. He still used to sit in his office, which was right on the road, keeping his door open so that anybody could come and talk to him and let him know about their grievances so that he could redress them. And at that very moment, one or two people had burst in, killed him point blank, shot him, and escaped. The tram driver could see the whole incident and he was stunned. He stopped. And we all stared in front ahead. We could see Nepal Roy slumping on his desk and there was blood all over. Thus, the history of the Naxalite movement in West Bengal became a very bloody one. And the government, the Congress government, which came into power in 1972 and was led by Siddhartha Shankar Ray, was absolutely repressive and merciless in suppressing the movement. The movement was finally wiped out in about a few years since 1969-70.
The defeat of Chief Minister Siddhartha Shankar Ray in the 1977 assembly elections marked the formal end of the long Congress rule. Jyoti Basu took over as Chief Minister, ushering in a 3-decade-long uninterrupted rule by the Communist parties. In line with its political manifesto, the first focus of the left government was on agrarian reforms. Operation Borga, launched in 1979, enshrined the rights of landless sharecroppers to obtain a major share of the produce and perpetuated their tenancy on land. Militant activism by left trade unions, along with the central government's freight equalization policy, had caused immense harm to industry in West Bengal since the 1950s. The situation became much worse during the 70s with chronic power outages throughout the state. The share of West Bengal in the total value of industrial output in India declined from 9.8% in 1980-81 to 5% in 1997-98. Also, the share of the state's bank credit in the national aggregate fell from 10.3% in 1980 to 5.9% in 2000.
In the 1960s, another form of labor unrest arising out of Gherao was unleashed in West Bengal. From my personal experience, I know the management staff were confined in their workplaces for long hours, sometimes overnight, for the realization of the demands of the workmen. Financial demands mostly could not be met, and they had to be rescued by court order with the help of police. This led to industrial sickness, flight of capital, and closure of many units.
With the economic liberalization in India in the early 90s, there was a course correction attempted in the state. This gained further steam during the government of Chief Minister Buddhadev Bhattacharya. In spite Of a spate of unfriendly governments at the center, the left regime maintained a strong grip on the levers of power through its well-oiled machinery comprising of thousands of party cadres, control of education and institutions of state, and the genuine left liberal orientation of a section of the state's population. For years and years, it seemed that no force was strong enough to stand up to the left establishment in Bengal.
এই কুচবিহারে এই জলপাইগুড়ি এই আলিপুরদুয়ার
But then there rose a voice, a single voice of protest. A lone fighter who got defeated and beaten up, picked herself up and kept fighting a hopeless battle for all of 27 years, until that voice became the voice of millions.
এই নামখানাতে
Through scores of spirited but often controversial movements at Netai, Shingur, Nondigram and 100 other places, Mamata Banerjee finally unseated the entrenched communist regime and stormed into the State Secretariat, Writers' Building, on May 20th, 2011 as Chief Minister at the head of a government formed by a Trinamool Congress. Through these long decades, though, poverty, political violence and corruption have continued to cast a long shadow on Bengal's march to the future. In the summer of 2021, as the state goes to the hustings again and competing visions of the future are held forth, we come to the end of these brief chronicles of Bengal's journey from the first, rather tentative references in the Aitareya Aranyaka to the rough and tumble of the present time, when West Bengal in India is in coexistence with the separate, sovereign Bangladesh. The journey has been as varied as it has been colourful, being anchored in the deep civilizational and cultural roots of the subcontinent from the dawn of history. These roots, along with the waves of civilizational influences over millennia, have made up the unique mosaic of pluralism that is at the heart of our civilization. As with all journeys, Bengal too has encountered sunlit uplands along with dark valleys of despair. Achievements have been matched by failures, and while shining hopes have been raised, deep frustrations have had to be endured. The heights of piety have been met with soulless violence. However, a redeeming spark of dynamism has always propelled the society ever onwards. The impulse of Charaiveti has not let the stream of reason irretrievably lose its way in the dreary desert sands of dead habit. As Bengal, along with the ebb and flow of its great rivers, journeys onward in time, may that impulse continue to provide guidance and confidence.